So we go back into open session.
Support.
Motion by Councilman Moore, supported by Councilman Felder. Roll call, or all in favor, say aye. Aye. We're back in, and we need a motion to adjourn. Second. Motion by Councilman Viney, supported by Councilman Lamore to adjourn. All in favor, say aye. Aye. That's adjourned. And we'll move right forward. It's 6:51. We have a council work session before our regular scheduled meeting. So at this time, unless there's any other time needed, I see none. We'll call the city council works session to order. Clerk, please call the roll.
Councilperson Germaini. Here. Lamore.
Here.
Felder.
Yes.
Whitman. Here. Angeli. Vining. Here. Mayor Clark.
Here. So we have a work session. Mr. Sell, any introduction, or we're going to go right to it?
These guys go. So we have our city attorney, Matt Buds, and chief of police, Charles McCormick, here to present on the drug nuisance ordinance and proposed chronic nuisance ordinance. And I forgot to turn on my mic. Sorry about that.
Okay. I'm not sure who's going to kick it off, but I know that there was a couple items that were sent to us in the materials for background. And Chief McCormick.
Good evening, everyone. I'm Charles McCormick, Chief of Police. Just, I guess my portion here at this time was just to kind of give what the current status is of how we address the drug nuisance properties. Currently we, under Chapter 296 of the codified ordinance, drugs, paraphernalia, nuisance properties, and loitering, we have the drug nuisance properties. It's in the persuasive presumption of a public nuisance. That's 296-6. So currently how this handled, information comes to our agency, whether it's through the Vice Unit, Road Patrol, or the Manus Unit, the task force with the state police, of a residence or a location in the city of Monroe that's involved generally in the sales of narcotics. An investigation is started. Based on that investigation, enough evidence of probable cause is gained to draft a search warrant, which is reviewed by a magistrate or a judge, and a raid is executed on that location. In the last couple of years, there's two properties of note, the one on East 2nd Street and one on Stone Street. Both of those properties raided twice within 365 days. Both times drugs and paraphernalia located at the locations. After the first one, the letter being sent by the attorney's office, notifying them of the first raid. Again, within that year, another one was done in both locations, and then action was taken. The property on East 2nd Street was boarded up for a year. The one on Stone Street, the tenant or the owner of that property had evicted the tenant and placed the property for sale, so that was the conclusion to that. That's currently the process we use. The ordinance does speak that a controlled substance and or narcotic paraphernalia are used, sold, furnished, given, or possessed on the property, or that the property has been raided by the police and controlled substances or drug paraphernalia are found by the police. And again, whether it was certainly now Mr. Buds, the previous city attorney, it was that raided language, because as you go further, it always discusses how do you then take action on a property, and it's that notice has been sent, and then a second raid has happened, and then we've boarded up the property. Now, from my perspective, one of the concerns is to go into a residence. If you just take the first part, that we're at a residence for a call for service and drugs are found. And unfortunately, one of the very common calls we go on in the city is a domestic violence complaint. I don't want to get in a situation where we're there on a domestic because somebody needs help or our services. Drugs may have been found. We send them a letter, and now, maybe 6 months down the road, the relationship's mended, but an incident occurs, and then that person doesn't want to call us or get our help because they know maybe in the way they look, they have one strike, and the second one would cause possibly an eviction. So I don't know if the attorney wants to add some more of that legalese to it, but that is a concern that we have.
Mr. Buds?
Your Honor, I would just say I think that's a fair summary of the process that we've used as far as the drug nuisance properties. And I know at least there was one inquiry from councilman about recent actions, and my office did in fact send out one of those letters in relation to I'll say fairly prominent event that occurred recently in the city to begin that presumption situation as well here. I tend to think that the system well, I guess I'll just say it's functioning the way that it's envisioned as far as the ordinance is concerned, as far as drug nuisance properties. When there's a raid like that, my office is notified. We send the letter out and begin that process. That's not to say there aren't other ways that that could be interpreted or handled under the drug nuisance ordinance. And then I think that'll also bring us to the discussion of whether I'll call it a chronic nuisance ordinance, is something that council would want to consider based on some of the other information that we presented. But I guess I would stop at that point and see if there are any questions as far as the drug nuisance portion of the existing ordinance is concerned.
Okay, questions this time? John?
Yeah, thanks, Your Honor. The question I have is that I'm thinking back to Stone Street and to East Second, and that had to have been 4 or 5 years ago.
I'm gonna say 2 probably years would be my guess. If I was thinking about that, and I could get you that date, but I was gonna say I think about
But
2 years.
I guess the question I have, okay, let's say that's even 2 years. With the amount of, based on the monthly reports that we get from the police department, okay, there is still a lot of drug activity in town. So even if it was 2 years ago, why haven't we seen more nuisance, why haven't the council been involved in more public hearings to close drug-related properties than what we have? Because I just don't see, I don't see a correlation going on. I read the monthly police reports, which then note different drug activity at different houses, but then we're not seeing anything happen on the other end. So I want to know, the question I have is why?
Well, it would be a drug raid that would occur twice in 1 year at the same residence. So, and I don't know that council, if you were notified when the letter is generated and sent that, hey, a raid was conducted at your residence, that drugs or paraphernalia were found, this is your warning, and, the language that goes into that is that warning of if a second raid is conducted in this residence within the year, you could be subjected to being closed, boarded up, what have you. So what we've not saw since the 2 on 6th Street and on Stone Street Second Street, was the same residence being raided twice within the calendar year.
Is that something we need to change?
I think that's ultimately a policy question of, how you want to go about that. I mean, I'll say there's also, some of this is how we have applied the existing ordinance, right? So, I mean, it's generally been that it's a raid occurs. If I'm notified, then the letter goes out, and if there's a second raid, then we have the public hearing. If there's a view that should be modified, should occur more frequently, the circumstances should be different, I think those are things that could possibly go into an ordinance amendment. But under the current operation of how we've been operating under the ordinance as it stands, that's the route that we've taken.
I'll start this way. Michelle?
What constitutes a chronic nuisance? How many calls does it take to make it chronic?
Well, the ordinance that we're working under is the drug ordinance for, we currently don't have, we've been to your residence 5 times, 8 times, 20 times on just calls for service and saying that you are now a chronic nuisance. That's not something that we operate in law enforcement. If you call, we come. Now, obviously, there are certain properties that we do go to exponentially more than others. But again, it's a call for service. The reasons for those calls could be wide ranging, from medicals, domestics. You have some places with disturbances and the like. But
If it's specifically for drugs, then what would that constitute?
so if we raided a house one time for drugs, then the letter is sent notifying them that, hey, you've been raided. And a second time within 365 days of that notice, if it's raided again, then we would take action to close the house or to board up the home.
I know that Kelly has a question, just maybe a follow-up to that, because when we send a letter, just so I think council understands, but those also watching, the letter goes to not just the person that's residing there, but if the property owner is kind of an absentee, it goes to that as well, correct?
That's my understanding, yes, based on the
Right.
tax bill.
Goes to the property owner, basically saying you have this that has occurred at your property, and I will say all of the circumstances that I can think of, it's been either a landlord, family member. It's not typically the person that we have not had a frequent amount of the person being the owner is the person that is also the target of the raid, I will say.
Kelly, you had a question.
Yeah, I didn't have a question. Just
Okay.
I was recalling when we talked about this when we boarded the two. Well, I think we only ended up boarding one of the properties on East Second Street, and the you had mentioned that this is something that rarely occurs.
Being at the same residence twice in 1 year for a
As
drug
us
raid?
actually going through the process of all the way through to boarding.
Yes.
The
In my
house,
experience, it has been, yes.
And I think that with the drug nuisance and certainly with the chronic nuisance, if it would even be considered, which I am against, that we have to look at everything on a case by case basis. For instance, the Stone Street, and I don't know, I don't have all the police reports and everything, but that owner, as I recall, lived in another state and was renting to her granddaughter. She had to fly up. I think there were analogs at this property. She had to fly up, and I think she just ended up selling the house or whatever. But um, I think sending a letter to inform the owner or the person at the house, that's a good idea. But I think each case has to be on a case by case basis because there's going to be different circumstances. Even in the event of a raid, there could be different circumstances. Um, and then what happens because a lot of times I see people get raided and then I see them back out on the street like a couple days later. So, or their case is dismissed or thrown out. What happens then?
This would be a separate issue from the criminal proceedings on it, although it seems like they're one, but they would be two separate instances. You would have the drug nuisance ordinance being enforced, and then you would have whatever, the criminal charges of it were. So it would be two separate items.
So does this, these articles speak to that if they're not found criminally liable?
They do not that I'm aware. No, it's more of a,
And
I'll
we
say
had
like of
already
a
went
civil
in.
action and a criminal action.
Okay.
So, Mr. Budge, go ahead.
Your
and
Honor, if I can, I
clarify.
just want to make sure we keep two things separate here. So first is, right now, I've sort of focused the discussion on our existing drug nuisance ordinance and not the potential for a chronic nuisance ordinance. And I'd say let's leave that, preferably, I would say, for a continued discussion. As far as the drug nuisance properties also, whether or not a letter is sent, I want to talk about that process. So the council could determine and make a declaration that a property consists of a public nuisance, whether or not the letter has been sent by my office or by anybody else on behalf of the city. That's done as a process. Our ordinance says that you can create a presumption that there's a drug nuisance if it occurs twice and this letter has been sent. But if we had a circumstance, I'll say that a council person or the chief or someone brought to the council's attention, it's possible under our existing ordinance to say, schedule that for a hearing, whether or not there's been, historic action, whether or not there's been a letter sent. I'll give for instance, let's say there's a property, it all of a sudden becomes a known problem. There are 3 raids within 2 weeks and I haven't sent the letter out yet. The chief could come to you and say, declare this a nuisance now, regardless of whether a letter was sent. The letter's a process that helps build the case and make a presumption if there's that second instance, but it's not a prerequisite to the council taking action. I will also say it requires the council to have a public hearing with appropriate notice, and those are all then factors that the council would, all of those factors the council would have to consider before taking any action.
Well, Kelly, finish and then go back to
So
you, John.
what is the question here today about the drug nuisance?
I don't think there's a question at this point. It was an update for you as we talked about various issues involving the police department, nuisance ordinances. This was more informational as to how we've been interpreting and enforcing that ordinance.
Where the next one of the follow-up maybe gets into the next step, and John, and I'll go ahead. But what is a chronic nuisance ordinance, and what might fall in there absent drugs? It could be a whole different type of nuisance. John, go ahead.
Yeah, thanks, Mayor. I kind of agree with Matt. Let's hold off on the chronic for a while because it's a little bit more complicated.
It is.
But let's take a look at the drug nuisance property ordinance. The ordinance was adopted in January of 1999, 20 years ago. 20 years ago, we did not have heroin in the street, we did not have fentanyl, we did not have opioids, and we didn't have people that had guns that were unregistered in their homes, along with the drugs. This ordinance needs to be updated to be much more proactive. That if we have a rental inspection program, part of the rental inspection agreement should be, if there are drugs or weapons found in a house that you're renting, we can automatically go into closure. Because I don't want to mess around anymore. I don't think giving people 365 days, it's like playing Monopoly. Let's go around the board one more time and you can start all over again. I think this ordinance is outdated based on what we're facing out in our neighborhoods. So I think personally, I think we need to update it. We need to make it stronger. We need to have more teeth, and we need to have a quicker process. That's my opinion. When the police find a house that has drugs and weapons, there should be no 365-day notice. It should go into immediate closure. And that puts the onus on the landlords to make sure that they rent to people that are appropriate. I'm kind of tired of giving landlords in this town a free pass all the time on the quality of their houses and who they rent their properties to.
So I know Kelly has comment. I just want to make a comment because, that long ago, there, actually was working here in that capacity. And I can tell you it's no different today than then. It's a different type of drug. Back then it was crack cocaine and methamphetamine, and things just continue to morph into new drugs. Not saying one's better than the other, John, because they're all bad. And there's guns at just about every search warrant ever went on. And so there was a process that was then, and there's a process now, and that's up to the council's discussion whether it's something you want to accelerate. But you also have to look at the last part is they do have an appeal process, and that thing gets outside of our, I'll say, arena of decision, and it goes to the court whether they think it is, and that's the foundation. And I don't know where that's at with the court. I can only speak to long ago of whether it was going to move forward or not. I can't speak to the current structure over at the courthouse and the judges, what their tolerance might be in relation to an ordinance like this. It would have required the process before. Not saying it requires it now. I know there's another question on my left, but Kelly, you had a comment.
Yeah, with John stating that he wants to add can you restate that you want to make the rental inspection a part of the process?
I think that, what I mentioned was when we have a rental agreement, when someone has a rental license to rent their property, in the license, there should be a condition that if that house is raided and found to have drugs or a weapon, it automatically goes into the drug nuisance property cycle. No 365 days. We have our public hearing, and then if they want to go to court and appeal it, they can. Okay. But,
So what I hear you saying, John, is that it's kind of a pre-notice versus notice after the fact.
correct.
Okay, and I know that, and I know the chief and the narcotics unit is doing it currently, have conversations with landlords, been to those meetings and try to get them to write it in their agreements of what they will or will not tolerate. Some would, but there's a couple that would not, and I know they don't today.
Yep.
And so they're willing to take the next step because it's further down the process maybe. So I understand now it's in the rental, come through the rental process of the inspection, getting their certification to occupy, is that there's a notice in there that states if these things are there, they can expect to receive immediate action regarding processes within the drug nuisance property ordinance. That's not about letter notification, but otherwise.
Yes.
So that's the rental side. Then I'll go to the homeowner side and the family side, which is maybe something that's the same, maybe it's different. That's up to council to have that discussion. So you have somebody that's living with their family member, and unbeknownst to them, but it happens, there's a raid and there's drugs. That's a homeowner versus, and I wonder how it might be accepted within the court of treating residents or properties differently, whether you're an owner versus a landlord. But I'm just throwing out thoughts right now. I don't have the answer of what where it might go, but I try to work through that, and I think that's something we'll have to do as we look at this if we're going to be looking at amending it too. But it's good to start discussion. Kelly, I think you had something else.
Yeah, I think most landlords that I know, and I don't know them all, have a clause in their lease that drugs, drug use or sale can have you within a 24-hour eviction. Now, I don't know all these other landlords who don't put it in there, but I'm just very uncomfortable that we want to keep targeting rentals. Are we prepared to say that homeowners don't have drugs, use drugs, or sell drugs, that we don't have raids at owner occupied homes? And it makes me very nervous that we want to keep focusing on rentals. Now, if it's only rental properties that have these issues, okay, but I doubt that. And I know we have some kind of point of sale requirements that we're doing now. And if we're going to throw this clause in for rental and landlords, then we need to throw it in for homeowners, because it's just unfair that we're going to target one subset of people. Of course, we need to target any drug nuisance property, and I don't want to make it easier just because you're a homeowner to possess or sell or use illegal drugs as opposed to if you're a renter. I don't think it's fair. So if we're going to make a change, I think we need to make it for every single resident in the city, not just for those who rent properties.
Other comments? I know we got plenty of time yet. So, Mr. Buds, I think there's a follow-up, and then we'll go from there.
Your Honor, for me. So I think part of this is what interpretation of the existing ordinance we would want to follow also. Typically, the raid discussion has been, I think, focused on distribution from those locations. I'll say if you look at section 296-4, I think the council has fairly broad power to declare anything a public nuisance under the ordinance which involves the use, sale, furnishing, giving, or possession of controlled substances on any property. I think, to me, policy question is, and I guess I defer to the chief on, if you have a situation involving a domestic call and there happens to be found drugs at that property, is that one that council wants brought before them? And I think, Chief, you're probably going to tell me we were going to have a large number of public hearings if that's the case. I'm not saying that that's not. I'm just saying that the way that we have interpreted in the past is to focus that enforcement on raids and on places that are distribution.
Kelly?
It's not a nuisance to me if somebody is in their private home using drugs or whatever, and nobody on our street knows anything about it. There's no cause, and then somebody falls down the stairs or somebody gets abused, and you guys show up, and we have a situation with a user, and you see some small. I think you guys would be able to determine if this is drugs for distribution or if a person may have some kind of drug abuse problem or something. This is what I think the different things we need to look at, because whether we want to admit it or not, there's a lot of functional addicts that are not a nuisance, but you might stumble upon their drugs. And I agree with the attorney. We will have a lot of hearings if you had to go every time you noticed, well, I can't use marijuana anymore, but if you noticed a small amount of drugs, and I'm sure in your job you can tell the difference between when you see something for distribution as opposed to somebody who might be a user. I don't know if that's what we want to do, is take houses away from everybody with the drug problem. So, I mean, I don't see anything wrong with this nuisance. I guess that's what I'm trying to say. It covers the use, the sale, the furnishing, the giving, or the possession of. So, I mean, you guys know when somebody's packaging and, trying to put drugs out on the street. And then as far as guns, I mean, we're talking about guns that are there illegally, I'm sure, right? Okay, yeah, so. And then how do you determine all of that? I mean, it's just, I don't see, I think the ordinance is fine. I don't see anything wrong with it.
John?
Your Honor, I guess my only comment's this. We've got some census tracts in the city, and one of them is between Monroe and Telegraph Road, south of the river. The amount of rental property now is 56% of the housing is rental, okay? Now, if I have a neighborhood where 5 of my neighbors are doing cocaine or heroin or fentanyl, I'm gonna be concerned because they have to be getting it from somebody. And that becomes a drug network or a neighborhood. So I'm sorry, I disagree with Kelly on this. We have to have a public policy that's basically almost zero tolerance to get the point across to people that are renting their properties to people that they know are involved in either drug trafficking or in the use of illegal narcotics. I mean, that's a responsibility that the landlord needs to have when you're renting properties, to do a background check on the people that you're renting property to. And I'm sorry, I just don't have a lot of sympathy for landlords that just basically will take rent on a week or a monthly basis without doing any type of background check. And then yet, our neighborhoods and our property values are suffering. And like I said a couple of weeks ago, Monroe never used to have the situations where we had, and maybe it was never public like it is now, situations where the police have come into houses that have had semi-automatic weapons. Or the fact that Monroe's had 5 shootings this year. We've never had that before. So to say that the public nuisance ordinance is working correctly that was adopted 20 years ago, I'm saying no, it's not. I'm saying that we really need to take a look at how this thing is going to work in the future.
Do we know?
Someone else will come back. Brian?
Yeah, I just wanted to ask John, would you be willing to include single-family homes with that as well as rentals?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah. I think if the police go to a homeowner, go to a house that where there's drugs that are, where they have a raid at a homeowner's house and that has weapons in it too, it should automatically get cycled into a fast track. I mean, I'm not making any differentiation between owner and renter. I'm just saying that the way this process is set up where they get two notices within 365 days, and technically, if they went to the 367th day, they basically got to start over again. So that's all I'm saying. I think we need to tweak this thing.
Chief, you have a comment?
Just real quick, but I think Attorney Buds had touched on that a little bit. We certainly then would make that argument, though, that, this house was just raided last year or a year and a half ago. Again, we've not saw the same property have it. Now, unfortunately, it may move a couple of streets over or what have you, but we've not. Now, there's certainly, not to confuse matters more, but there's forfeiture, right? We've forfeited homes in the city because of the quantity and the different aspects of that investigation that led us to actually seizing the home, whether it was a rental or someone's private residence. So.
Other comments? I know we have about 10 minutes. Brian, and
Yeah,
I'll
real
go to
quickly,
Andrew.
Just with Chief, do you see this as potentially being something that you could utilize to your advantage?
Well, we always want, the right tools in our toolbox for sure. And if it's something, that, we could, we could in essence report all of these incidents to council, that every time, and the vast majority, we're there for another matter or we're invited into the home for a reason. It's probably more of a possession type of a case. Usually a drug dealer's not going to invite us into the home, very rarely, right? Those means to getting into that house are usually different, right? And that's when a search warrant comes into play. So I think what you will see is us there on a different matter. Maybe it's a probation home inspection. Someone's on probation because they've been caught in a possession case and they still have drugs in the home now in a possession case. I do think that that'll be the vast majority of what would be reported would be a possession charge, which is a felony, but, a possession type charge. And, the deliveries or the possession with the intent to deliver are fewer.
Andrew, and then I'll make some final comments, and I know we had some other items we'll talk about. Andrew?
Just a quick question. Does this relate just to residential properties or all properties? Because a lot of the exchanges of illicit substances doesn't necessarily take place on residential properties. I have in mind specifically parking lots. And if there's a drug exchange on a parking lot of a business, is the business then at fault and subject to the ordinance?
I confess I have not thought about it in that regard. Let me take a quick. Any structure, house, building, or premises, or any part thereof is the definition of property, so I would argue that's fairly broad. The question would be then securing that, right? So, I mean, historically, let's talk about the ones that I will say I think we had. The two that we think about most historically are the one on East 2nd, and I will say, I guess from my perspective, a policy question is that's remained boarded. They haven't come to take the boards down. I don't think there's been any activity there, whether that's good, bad, whether we've accomplished. I think certainly we put the message out there that that wasn't going to be a house that was going to continue to, be a place where drugs were going to be distributed. I'll say it's not, been put back into a productive use at this point in time, which I guess is a negative in my personal opinion. But, we'd have the question of securing that. So we've normally talked about padlocking, boarding, that sort of thing. But certainly I think based on the definition of property, you could take a fairly broad view of that.
And second of all, per the material, we don't plan on instituting any domestic violence criteria as part of the legislation.
Your Honor, I guess I would say that that's a policy question. We haven't talked really in any more detail about the chronic nuisance kind of concept,
Perhaps
and I would say we should
conversation
leave
for
that
another
for another. I think that's worthwhile of another discussion.
Next, I think there's still a lot of discussion, I think, on the drug nuisance. As Andrew says, you have commercial building. While the commercial building is doing other sales of legal items, they either are tolerating or permitting or receiving benefit from activities that are going on that are illegal. So then you get into the commercial location. And, in this ordinance as well, it talks about paraphernalia. And you're talking the difference between a felony and a misdemeanor. And is that a criteria that we should be putting into this as well? Thinking back, I'm sure it's still going on, where there's paraphernalia sold in commercial buildings that is basically drug paraphernalia. May not look like it when it's going out the door, but it's exactly what it is. And then it's used for other items. So there's things that do change in the world of drugs, not just the drug type, but the way in which it operates. Whether it be covertly or on the street or otherwise commercial, residential. So I think that's a good start discussion. I think we have a lot more that we need to think about. Maybe we'll, obviously with the city manager or the assistant city manager, we'll look at probably picking up this conversation again, not only on the drug ordinance, but also on the nuisance. With that, I also want to say, because we are running short here, Mr. Green was here, and of course we had some other documents that were in our packets. I think make sure you review those, because it really talks about the proposed neighborhood reorganization and what that is. So I don't know if you got a couple minutes, you can just let us know, because we really have to move on. Yeah.
Mr. Mayor, members of council, Mr. Sell, Jeffrey Green, Director of Community Development. I think Mr. Pastu summarized kind of our discussions over the past number of months about the reorganization of the department. And I've had the opportunity to talk with several of you in conversations regarding neighborhoods and regarding some of the things going on related to the building department. And certainly the rental inspections, rental housing are the other half of the drug nuisance and the chronic nuisance ordinance that you're looking at. And so what I put together for Mr. Pastu was basically a reorganization of the department that would create a division of neighborhoods that would focus primarily on neighborhoods. And one of the ways of doing that is putting the blight, putting the rental inspection, putting the CDBG planner all under kind of one line of thought and separating them somewhat from the building enforcement segment of the department. And so under this organizational change, as indicated in Mr. Pastu's fact sheet, we would be looking at a division of planning and historic preservation, which historic preservation could also have a neighborhood component, and certainly does. We would have a building and enforcement, which provides those typical building activities, permits, plan reviews, enforcement, and we would have a neighborhoods division. And again, neighborhoods would include a dedicated rental inspector and coordinator that looks at these projects. It would have a rental clerk and CDBG assistant. It would have blight inspectors that are working with neighborhoods, both full and part-time. We would have a housing consultant to help us with, to assist in neighborhood development of various kinds, whether that's grants or CDBG funds that we're bringing back into the neighborhoods. And of course, as Mr. Pastu also alluded to, there would be additional legal support to help us go through and address some of these issues. Essentially, the reorganization will align similar functions and focus, as well as encouraging us to look at potential collaborations between the city and neighborhood agencies and organizations that will prove mutually beneficial for the city and all of our neighborhoods. So I'd be happy to answer any questions.
I know it's a quick run through. Andrew, and then we got about 2 minutes.
I got two. The current rental inspections take place every 3 years, but it's proposed now with the new rental inspections to be at point of sale every time the property changes hands.
That is a discussion that's going on. Again, that would be a policy decision by the council of how you would like to do it and the frequency.
Yep.
All right, yeah, that sort of answers my second part, which says it's going to be more frequent. And my understanding of what we've discussed in the past is it's not necessarily more frequent, but just conditional.
Could be.
Okay. And then the second point is the recommendation to make unlimited collection for single-family dwellings that are rented, have removed the unlimited refuse collection provision for those residents.
That's really Mr. Pastu and I think Mr. Lewis did the inspections on the homes for the refuse, I think you're referencing. Patrick might be able to address that, short time, maybe not. But I think that the idea was that there were a number of multi-units within buildings that were
Certainly.
not being charged appropriately, and it is a business, essentially.
I'm fine requiring them to pay their fair share, but to say that the residents that are occupying the property don't have the same right as any other resident of the city of Monroe to put out as much garbage. Enforcement comes to mind as an issue, but fairness certainly comes to mind as another. If we want to make them pay their fair share, I'm fine with that, but to limit what they put out, I have more of an issue with. That's just me.
John?
Two questions. Jeff, on your organizational chart, you've got the rental inspector and the blight inspector that both have a gold and a blue line around them, which would tell me that they're going to be kind of bouncing around between two different divisions.
Well, there would actually be interaction between those, and that was the early proposed organizational chart. I did kind of change up a little bit later and redid it a little bit. But I think the idea is that while there would be interaction between building and the neighborhoods, essentially it would fall under the direction of one line of command for the neighborhoods.
So the rental inspector and the blight inspector would be all gold.
Yep.
Under the neighborhood section. That's
I have
good.
some other questions too. I think there's me. You'll be back for further discussion. So we only have about a minute. So, Clerk Treasurer.
He said to plan to just go right into the next meeting.
Okay.
Because we don't have time to stop.
All right. Well, I'm at least going to need to close the work session, which we'll do at this time. And as I'm looking at the clock, we'll be moving right in here within a minute. Just get your paperwork and your computer in order for the correct item after our third item here this evening. Third meeting. Okay, it is 7:30. Call the city council meeting to order. Clerk, please call the roll.
Councilperson Germaine? Here. Lamore? Here. Felder?
Here.
Whitman? Here. Michaelangeli?
Here.
Vining? Here. Mayor Clark?
Here, I'd ask we all please rise to the invocation, remain standing for the Pledge of Allegiance.
As we come together this evening, let us continue to work together to make our city a place that we are proud to call home. Help us engage in meaningful discussion, allow us to grow closer as a group, and nurture the bonds of community. Remind us that all that we do here this evening and all that we accomplish is for the welfare of those who call Monroe home and those who visit and wish to do business here.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible,
with liberty and justice for all.
Clerk, first item, please.
The first item would be any amendments to the agenda.
Looking at the city manager, assistant city manager first, or city attorney, I see nothing there. Council or clerk's office, any adjustments? None? Okay, next item, please.
The next item are any citizen comments not related to an agenda item.
Very well. Any comments from those present here this evening not related to an agenda item? Yes, please come forward. State your name, please.
I'm Sam Struth with Flags Over Veterans. Mayor Clark and the council members, on behalf of the Flags Over Veterans and all the citizens of Monroe County that helped make our project a success, I want to thank you for partnering with us in the purchasing and installation of the additional flagpoles and flags at the World War Memorial in Veterans Park. This action brought the memorial up to date with a flag for the U.S. Coast Guard and the POW MIA flag. The site will now represent all branches of the military and those that never returned. I want to thank Councilman Lamore for directing me on how to approach this project, and with the communications that we kind of stumbled through during the project. And I also want to commend Brad Willey with your Parks Department. He was a pleasure to work with. Every obstacle that was presented to us, he helped us overcome, even to the point of they took on a lot of the construction themselves. And in the middle of the project, we had a vendor wanted to double the price of the poles after they were ordered. And obviously, we ordered them from someone else. But I also want to thank you, the members, for stepping up after I had quoted you what I thought was a good price. You guys came back with some more money, and we split it, and we were able to get the poles up. So on November 7th, well, Wednesday, the poles are actually going to be installed. And on November 7th, the Monroe VFW post is going to do a rededication and candlelight ceremony at this site at 7 p.m. And you are all invited if you want to come out and to the ceremony. So thank you very much, and I enjoyed working with you guys and with Brad and Brian.
Thank you, Sam. Appreciate it. I know that I saw as the project was progressing and knew it was coming close. I saw the bases were put in and over the weekend, and I know that it would be coming soon. So glad you're here to let us know that, let the residents know, and hopefully that council, or at least our residents, will be able to attend on November 7th at 7 p.m. for the rededication.
All right.
It'll be a wonderful display of our community
I'm
support.
sorry, that's November 11th.
11th, okay.
Veterans Day. 11/11.
Got it. So that'll be, yes, November 11th.
All right.
Okay.
Thank you very
7
much.
p.m.
Appreciate it.
All right, thank you. Other comments from those present here this evening not related to an agenda item? Seeing none, clerk, next item, please.
The next item is a proclamation, item 2566, Homeless Awareness Week, November 1st through the 10th, 2019.
So I do have the proclamation. I appreciate the support from City Council. And I see that Stephanie Kazarczak is here from MCOP. While I'm going to speak with Stephanie at the podium to talk about this and also get an update from her, I'm going to present it, but we're going to take it back because we know we have a couple public items as well that is going to be attended by administration. So I'm going to come down and join Stephanie just to kind of talk about the proclamation, and at the same time we'll give the stage to her. So we're going to stand here for a second. I'm
All
not
right.
going to read all this because I think it's important to at least to review with Stephanie being here, because when we talked about this and with the council about recognizing the Monroe County Network on Homelessness and of course Homeless Awareness Week and why that's important and activities that are coming up that I know that Stephanie will be speaking to. But I appreciate the council's continued support of what we recognize within our community and the needs that are here. But every year, there's always the public and private agencies that observe this. The council has consistently done that as to make sure that we recognize what our role is, and what our role is not just the council, but also as residents of the city. There's be several events that will be coming up that will be spoken to. And the kickoff begins on November 1st, but there's some activities that start there at the Monroe Center for Healthy Aging. But one event, and it says here within the proclamation, which is always one that I think people are willing to want to be a participant in, is the event for the Walk for Warmth, which is going to be on November 2nd.
Correct.
And on Saturday, and we'll make some comments to that as well at the end of the meeting, but give that to Stephanie to make. But every day there are men, women, children in Monroe County who do not have a place they can call home. And each year, Monroe County Network on Homeless provides service to more than 1,100 people who live within our community of what their individual needs may be. And of course, the vision is to end homeless, one individual, one family at a time. So during this week, we joined with the Monroe County Opportunity Program and the Monroe County Network on Homelessness to raise awareness about this issue within our community and how we best address that. And the proclamation as it reads, and I know she's going to hear this again when they have the breakfast that she'll talk about at the kickoff breakfast, but it's the proclamation, it's from, and it says, therefore I, Robert E. Clark, Mayor of the City of Monroe, with full support of the City Council, do hereby proclaim the week of March 1st through 10th, 2019 as Homeless Awareness Week. We encourage all citizens to participate in raising awareness about homelessness and become an active participant. So Stephanie, I'll let you have this at this time and make your comments. I know you have some things you want to talk about.
Absolutely.
And then I'll pick it up later when I come back.
Perfect. Thank you very much for the proclamation. We appreciate that. Stephanie Kasperzak. And tonight I'm here as the chairperson of the Monroe County Network on Homelessness. I realized the other day that I've been through almost 2 10-year plans. So if you do the math, I've been the chair of the Network on Homelessness for a very long time. That being said, I passed around some information. It's always a nice opportunity not only to tell you what's going on during Homeless Awareness Week, but also to give you a status of homelessness in Monroe County. So the information that you received today is the short version. For those of you who like data and like to really dig into the demographics of our homeless population in Monroe County, I do have that electronically, but only presented the short version here tonight. So as Mayor Clark mentioned, we have Homeless Awareness Week starting the 1st through the 10th. We have a lot of great activities. Our first activity is our breakfast, our Homeless Heroes Breakfast. So I would like to invite all of you to come to our Homeless Heroes Breakfast on November 1st, 7:45 a.m. It is free. We'll have breakfast, and then we're going to recognize some of our homeless heroes. Typically, we keep that a secret, but this year we kind of changed it up a little bit. We're going to be recognizing Tim Kelly, who's our local Department of Health and Human Services Director. He's been the vice chair of our network for many years and is moving on to different things. So he will no longer be part of the Monroe County Network on Homelessness. And so we're recognizing him with an award. And then we have 3 wonderful groups who've really gone above and beyond to help the homeless in Monroe County. We have the Thrift Shop Association, who for many years has helped homeless children by way of clothing, obviously through the thrift shop, but also they've given financial donations to our Housing for Homeless Youth program, and they have for many years worked with Monroe Public Schools and the McKinney-Vento liaisons to make sure that each homeless child had a good Christmas. We're also going to be recognizing Sue Jones, who is a teacher at Monroe High School, and the Interact Club. And so the Interact Club for many years has run a Homeless Awareness Week activity called Box City, where the kids literally sleep outside and they get the feeling of being homeless and get to learn about how many homeless people there are in Monroe County. So that group has been very active. We're going to be recognizing them. And then we're also going to recognize the Huddle Group and the Huddle Group is a group of women who last year in 2018 went to all the homeless shelters in Monroe County and registered people to vote. So we had hundreds of voter registration applications that came in, and they distributed them to all the clerk's offices, not only in Monroe County, but we had a couple outside of Monroe County as well. And then they also provided volunteer transportation on election day to get homeless people to the polls. So those are the groups that we're going to be recognizing. Please come join us if you can. And I'm not going to read all of these, but I have to for MCOP, our 29th annual Walk for Warmth. We've been walking for 29 years to make sure that we have crisis utility assistance in Monroe County. We changed that a little bit this year. We're going to be Saturday, November 2nd, 10 a.m. right downtown. So if you can join us, we would appreciate it. Utility assistance is one of the greatest needs in Monroe County. And so making sure that we have enough money to keep everyone warm is very important. So the rest of the activities are listed on here. If you have any questions, you can just get in contact with me. The second page is our annual, these are our 10-year plan goals. Again, I'm not going to go through all of them, but our 2020 vision seemed a long way off 9 years ago, but here we are in 2020 next year. So we are going to put our planning group back together and talk about updating this plan. But as you can see here, our goals really focus around increasing awareness, increasing access to safe, decent, and affordable housing, providing a continuum of services so that we're communicating with one another in Monroe County to make sure that we serve our homeless population, coordinating resources to make sure that people have increased income, and then strengthening our crisis response system. So I would be remiss at this point if I didn't mention our emergency shelter system. In Monroe County, we really stick together. And so there isn't a day that doesn't go by, Paula, for example, that we aren't talking to Paula's House and Oaks and a lot of the emergency shelters to make sure that we're getting people inside and to a shelter. And then housing them rather quickly. In Monroe County, we're pretty successful in getting people into housing really within 30 days if we can. Sometimes it takes a little longer based on extenuating circumstances, but we do work really hard to get everybody housed as quickly as possible. And we just had 35 homeless people go on to the Section 8 voucher. They got their Section 8 voucher, so they'll be going into permanent housing. So we keep working very hard to make sure that we meet our vision, which is to end homelessness one family, one individual at a time. The last page is our 2018 numbers. So again, this is just a snapshot. If you're interested in the full set of data, we do have it. I can email it to you. But throughout the course of a year, the Monroe County Network on Homelessness, which is our emergency shelters, transitional shelters, MCOP is the rapid rehousing provider, served over 1,000 homeless individuals. So 1,094 homeless people coursed through our data system, our shelters, our transitional housing in Monroe County. You can see there the breakdown of adults, youth, children, and families. We had, so sorry, I forgot to bring my glasses up with me. I think it says 95 unaccompanied youth.
Yes.
Which is 95 too many. So we are working at MCOP to grow and expand our Housing for Homeless Youth program because that number continues to grow, and we hear that over and over from our McKinney-Vento liaisons in all of our public school districts. So that's something we're going to focus on and have had a lot of good conversation at our network meetings over the last few months. And then we have veterans there and seniors. We had 111 senior citizens who were homeless in Monroe County in 2018. So the work is never done. On any given night in Monroe County, we have about 180 homeless people. So through our wonderful network on homelessness and all the providers who are part of it, we continue to strengthen our capacity and do more to make sure that people aren't living on the streets in Monroe. So thank you for having me tonight, and I will answer any questions if you have any.
I'll see if there's any questions. When Stephanie and I chatted about the proclamation, of course, in support of the council, we thought also as an opportunity, well, it doesn't say presentation on here, but the opportunity to give a presentation to council of, I'll just say information here, and especially the fact that it's, 10 years have gone by in a time frame here that we're looking to revisit how that is, and as MCLP puts that work group back together to look at what the next 10 years are and how do we really address what the circumstances are, and I think it's always good to review. So I'll see if there's any questions or for Stephanie from council. No? Very good.
One last
Yes.
pitch. I know this is not Homeless Awareness Week, but we are having an open house that I wanted to invite you all to at the Opportunity Center at ALCC on Wednesday, November 13th from 6 to 8 p.m. We're working with the Great Start Collaborative, and we hope you all can come out and join us and see what all the great things going on at the Opportunity Center.
Very good.
Thank you.
Yes. Michelle, microphone.
Are you having a food truck distribution? Sorry. Are you having a food distribution soon? Is that coming up?
Food distribution at the Opportunity Center.
Yes.
Just did.
We have, our TFAP food distribution is gonna be happening in November, but I don't have dates for that yet. We don't have a mobile going on, at the Opportunity
Maybe I'm
Center. We
thinking of
did
that
in,
one. All right.
yeah, we did October 5th.
You don't know the date?
I don't think there is one planned coming up. Yeah. All right, thank you
good.
very much.
All right, thanks, Stephanie.
Leave that?
Just leave it right there. I'll pick that up later. Thank you. Please.
Is under council action, and it's item 2560, Labor Park Bid Award and Purchase Agreements.
Assistant City Manager, Mr. Sell, any introductions or moving forward, or?
I'll just introduce it real quick. I know it's been talked about quite a bit in past city council meetings and work sessions, but because there's a lot of different actions in one motion, I'm just going to summarize it real quick here. So this motion would award an agreement to E.R. Zeiler Excavating in the amount of $1,146,062, and it would encumber a total of $1.2 million for contingencies. It would also award a purchase to Ventura LLC in the amount of $88,541 for play equipment and park shelter, or picnic shelter, excuse me. And there would also be an award made to Vortex USA in the amount of $58,605 for the water feature. This allows the city manager as designated to enter into these agreements. To fund this project, it would require an additional appropriation from the general fund in the amount of $348,000, and that would come from general fund balance.
Looking to the council, if there's any comments. If not, Council Michelangelo?
I was going to make a motion, Your Honor.
Very good. I don't, is there a question first, or?
Not a
No.
question.
Councilman?
Make a motion that we approve the contracts for the labor park improvements for the following: E.R. Zeller Excavating in the amount of $1.146 million plus 5% contingency. Contract to Ventura LLC in the amount of $88,541.90 for play equipment, and for Vortex USA in the amount of $58,605. Authorize the city manager and designee to sign the appropriate contracts, as well as the mayor and city clerk, and then also appropriate from the general fund balance an amount in the amount of $348,000 to complete funding for the project.
Support.
There's a motion by Council Michelangelo, supported by Councilman Vining on item 2560, the Labor Park Bid Award and Purchase Agreement. Any comments? I'll start with Councilman Lamore.
Yes, I have a few comments, Your Honor. I'm very uncomfortable of taking an additional $350,000 from the general fund. Not because I don't think this project's worth it, but because I believe that there are future items coming up, DTE, for example, that we don't have an idea really as to where we're going to be with that. And I really am uncomfortable getting that money away from the general fund when it could be used for other future things that may be a necessity, such as saving staff or other services or whatever may come about. But it's just not very comforting knowing that we're going to take this out of the general fund, along with the potential of another $250,000 coming out for the roof for the multi-sports complex. So there's a lot of things that are going to be coming out of the general fund potentially here that I'm not very comfortable with. That's just wanted to go on record stating that.
Very good.
Yeah.
Councilwoman, do you have a comment? Okay, I'm sorry, I'm looking the wrong way. Councilwoman Vining.
Yes, I'd like to say I'm very, very excited for this project to finally get started. I know we have 5 other parks in the master park plan coming up behind this, so we're gonna have to find the money if we're going to implement and execute our own plans. I also feel very comfortable making this move because our assistant city manager slash finance director, who since I've known him, is very conservative with the city's dollars. Expressed his comfort in making this move of taking them $348,000 from the general fund, as did our very capable city manager. And so I am very comfortable and also very excited that this project is going to start. And can anybody tell me when we'll see some shovels in the ground? That's what I want to know.
Okay. Mr. Lewis, as he comes up, I just want to, just to follow with Councilman Vining, reference was to our last meeting on the fund balance, and the question obviously was brought up. Where are we at on the fund balance, and is there space within that fund balance? What is the generally considered a percent of fund balance that a municipality should have? And I think that's where Councilman Vining's comments come from listening to Mr. Sell and the city manager. Where we are is above what is, is a good fund balance that this does not take it to a comfort, below a comfort level as was presented. Mr. Lewis?
I'll answer the easy question first. Honorable Mayor and Council, Patrick Lewis, Director of Engineering and Public Services. Actually, we got a call from the contractor today. He wanted to set up a pre-construction meeting this week, and I told him he needed to wait until after the council awarded the contract tonight. So I would expect, since Zeiler is getting close to wrapping up the water main work, they do want to start this fall. He even talked about as early as next week. No promises, because the weather this time of year can be pretty dicey, but I do anticipate some construction work will indeed occur this fall. I just wanted to share that with you. Thank you for asking, because that gave me the opportunity to do so.
Good question, good response. Councilman Michelangelo?
Thanks, Your Honor. One of the things that I'll mention is about the $348,000 out of the general fund balance. A couple of years ago, when we had we always have our annual audit review with Plant Moran, they had indicated that, we had a certain percentage in the fund balance, and the question was, what happens with a community that has this kind of percentage in the fund balance? And the partners from Plant Moran, I think they are partners, aren't they? They do our account. One of them is a partner. Said that communities that withhold money into their fund balance in order to drive the percentage up are communities that are not reinvesting in themselves. So when we asked the question to the manager and the finance director, assistant city manager 2 weeks ago, were they comfortable with this? And Mr. Sell said he was comfortable with it. I'm comfortable with it. And I think it's time that this type of an investment will last that neighborhood for the next 20 years.
I'll just make a final, I was going to say, I'll say it and I'll go back to Councilman Lamore. I understand both positions. I'm pretty conservative myself when it comes about finances and how we spend. And I think that at some point there's that project that we've talked about a long time about our parks plans and where we wanted to start and the reason, the purpose for this. I don't hear anybody that's not in support of the project. The idea is really about, we're making a decision that obviously is not something that we're doing and haven't done. I can think of much of, if at all, but the idea is that this project is going to continue to develop around the corridor plan and other items. I think that's why we started there. Councilman Lamore.
Yeah, like I said before, I favor the project. I think it's a great project. I just am a little leery about the fact that DT is out there. The whole tax situation with them is not resolved, and that's my premise behind not being comfortable in taking the $348,000 out of the general fund.
Very good. Other comments? There's a motion and a second to accept the item 2560, the Labor Park Bid Award and Purchase Agreement. Clerk, please call the roll.
Councilperson Germaini?
Yes.
Lamore?
No.
Felder?
Yes.
Whitman? Yes. Michaelangeli?
Yes.
Vining?
Yes.
Mayor Clark?
Yes. Clerk, next item, please.
The next item is item 2573, Professional Services Award, Perspective 2020 Project Topographic Survey.
City Manager, or Assistant City Manager, Mr. Sell.
Real brief, this is proposal to award to the Mannequin Smith Group an agreement in the amount of $64,000 with 15% contingency to be appropriated up to $74,000. The funding is from the major and local street funds. It is funding that we had set aside at the beginning of the year for projects that we know are coming in the future, but we don't know exactly what the projects are. So we did set aside some money for these, and just asking for approval to enter into the agreement at this point.
Any questions from council? Oh, I'm sorry, Councilman Felder.
Thank you, Your Honor. I believe that the purpose of the purchase is largely to backfill the work for a position that has since been vacated. And I'm wondering as to the frequency with which these projects will be approved, and if there's more work to be done long-term, and then if we have intentions of refilling that vacant position, or if at this point it's more cost-effective to contract out those services. Sometimes I feel like Mannequin Smith, I know they're a local contractor, I really like that I think we should offer them an office at City Hall sometimes because they're down here so much, so.
So this position has been vacant for at least a couple of years now. It has not been our intention to refill the position and to contract these services out. Every year we'll need to do surveying for new capital projects that are coming up in the coming year, so it'll be an annual agreement that we'll have to be entering into with them. And it's based on which projects we identify that may be coming up in the coming year or may be able to be approved through the coming capital improvement program. So that's kind of where we're at with this point. And feel free to have Mr. Lewis address it as well if you'd like, but that's where we've been at with it.
And just broadly, do we feel that this is a cost-saving measure to proceed in this fashion?
Yes, I think we do. I mean, compared to having a two-person crew, this is, I think we do.
Your Honor.
Councilman Michelangelo?
As an owner of an engineering company, I would say this is based on the amount of survey work they're doing, this is a pretty competitive price. And I think that in the long term, based on what Assistant City Manager just said, having a two-person survey crew available all the time is very inefficient because you really need survey only at select periods in the process. At the very beginning, as part of the design work. So this type of engineering services is very cost effective for the city.
Wonderful. Thank you for the information.
Other comments? I have one, and it's not that I don't support moving forward. It always comes a time when we have to decide what projects are going to get it done. We haven't done the capital improvements yet, but this, if I understand, and either Mr. Sell or Mr. Lewis can answer, this is the survey work that we're intending to have done. If without the survey work, then the others that are listed in with our street survey summary and those that may be higher rated of needing work that aren't on this list, if the survey's not done, I'm assuming then that the project wouldn't move forward next year because it'll require that unless the survey work's been done previously. Would that be correct?
I would defer to Mr. Lewis on that.
Mr. Lewis, 'cause I just have a couple questions on a couple of them.
Again, Honorable Mayor and Council, Patrick Lewis, Director of Engineering and Public Services. Yes, to answer the earlier question, the survey crew position, this is a fairly large list. So, I mean, this will be about the largest program we're going to have in a typical year. And so we did have a two-person crew, and both of those were positions where we're looking at this, even with this large of a list, we are saving money versus the cost. We did a thorough analysis. That position was actually identified way back in 2008. So just to add further insight to that, I would agree with the earlier comments made. As for the list of projects here, there is one glaring project that you may notice that actually the survey work is done, for example. That would be Toll Street. And that's one we're seriously considering for 2020. But as correctly noted, not every one of these projects will be funded, but we're still trying to figure out exactly how much money we will have available to us for 2020. What we want to do is be able to not be caught flat-footed when we make those decisions. It could be as late as January, February. If we don't have the survey and we're trying to get those projects designed, we're looking at April or May before we can bid the work, and that has been a problem the last few years. So that's what we're broadly trying to accomplish by getting as many of these out as possible, with the understanding that survey data is typically good for a couple, 3 years without significant changes in the landscape. So
there's probably more projects here than what will be capital improvements next year, but you got to have the survey work done. All the projects that are on the list, no question, I think council residents will recognize are in need of repair, yet there's only so much that can be done with the revenues that are available regarding street funding. There's a couple items on this list that when I look at the street index and the ratings, and one is adjoining to this project, which is West Fifth on the, I'll say the east end of West Fifth between Monroe and Harrison, is not on the list. I said east, I'm sorry, West Fifth and West Fourth. I understand West Fourth maybe. So my question is, are either of those pending some other projects that might be infrastructure work that's being held off for that reason, or is there some other reason, maybe?
Well, those are both, as you correctly noted, Mayor, those are both projects that, this is not an exhaustive list. Fifth Street, I believe we do have water main replacement that would need to occur on that one. We tried to stay light on the water main projects because we were so heavy this year. So that was one that I think we did subconsciously push to the side. West 4th Street, we actually are still toying with whether or not we need to get a new survey done because the water main survey was done 8-9 years ago for the water main project. So we might not have to survey that one if we chose to do it. It's one that's, again, potentially on the list, but so are $5 million worth of work. So
one of the reasons I bring this up is not that I don't support the projects that are here, but residents ask council members and ask myself and administration, when is this street X, fill in the blank, going to be next on the list? And I always refer them to the work that's done by the staff, and of course we have the annual street condition report that came out in July, and people can obtain and the residents can go to this and see where they rate. There are circumstances why you may have a higher rating of a need of repair, why it may not get done. For instance, the infrastructure work has to be done first. You wouldn't do the street and come back and put down storm sewers or something. But understanding that, so it gives the residents the opportunity to go and see what that is. I wanted to just share this conversation that there may be reasons why some are maybe not on the list, at least what's on tonight's agenda's list. And then I know that there's the discussion around the government complex, and there's 3 streets that are on here that are within the complex, and there may be movement forward on that may, you need to have the survey done, but it may or may not get done depending on how that discussion goes between the city, the county, and some other ideas that council has talked about before. So it's just like a broad review of that, and I'll stop with my comments. I'll see if there's any others. If not, what we have before us is to award the professional services award for the topographical survey. So if there's
Your Honor, I'll make a motion that we approve the contract with Manick and Smith Group in the amount of $64,000 plus a 15% contingency.
Second.
Motion by Councilman Michael supported by Councilman Lamore on item number 2573. Any final comments? Clerk, please call the roll.
Councilperson Germaine?
Yes.
Lamore?
Yes.
Felder?
Yes.
Whitman?
Yes.
Echoangeli?
Yes.
Vining? Mayor Clark?
Yes. Next item, please.
The next item is the consent agenda, and for approval of payments, item B, the amount should read $777,376.74, 777,376.74.
Thank you. Are there any items on the consent agenda that council wishes to pull for further discussion?
Your Honor.
Councilman Lamore.
Yes, item number 2572, please.
Your Honor,
Councilwoman Vining.
number 2582, please.
Other items on the consent agenda council wishes to have pulled for further discussion? Seeing none, are there any items on the consent agenda those present here this evening wish to have pulled for further discussion? Any items from those present here this evening? Seeing none, a motion would be in order.
That we approve the consent agenda with the exception of item number 2572 and 2582, have all of its actions carried out, and the clerk records all the actions.
Second.
Motion by Councilman Lamore, supported by Councilwoman Germaine, that all items on the consent agenda not pulled for further discussion be accepted, placed on file. I'll say the recommendations and resolutions adopted. Clerk, please call the roll.
Councilperson Germaine?
Yes.
Lamore?
Yes.
Felder?
Yes.
Whitman? Michaelangeli? Vining?
Yes.
Mayor Clark?
Yes. Next item, please.
Next item is item 2572, Managed Print Services Agreement.
Councilman Lamore.
Yes, Your Honor. I noticed on here, it mentions that there's a $931.69 per month monthly contract versus $859. Just curious as to what the contract is for. Is it for the lease of the equipment? The services themselves? What do we got going on there?
Mr. Sell?
Yeah. Sorry, I'm trying to get to the right page here.
Yeah, me too.
'Cause I believe I know it is, but I'm gonna make sure.
107.
Computer doesn't want to move very fast. The 931 is actually what our current cost is for maintaining the printers. It's what we provided Applied Imaging with invoices and contracts for what we're currently paying for toner, printer toner, and maintenance of the printers currently. And based on that, our monthly estimate of what it's costing us currently is $931. So it's not a new contract, it's what we're paying, and that comes out of each department's budget. So it's not like, it's not centralized in one area, but by digging into our data in terms of invoices and payments that we've made, that was what the estimate is of our current cost. So what it's saying is, currently we're estimated to be paying $931 a month. Under the contract, we'd be paying $859 a month.
Will that include all clicks?
Yes,
the machines?
all clicks.
Fantastic.
Yes. And I do think, I'll say, because it's one of my goals with this is to get things centralized so we can then manage it better, at least get an understanding of what we're doing. So if we need to do things differently, we can. So I almost think that the $931 a month might be a little low because it's so decentralized now. It's probably hard to identify each cost that we make or pay, each cost that we pay at this point.
Were you paying click costs prior? Or
No, right now it's basically every department's on their own. They buy their own toner. They call for service.
Oh,
Yep, pay for it out of each of their individual budgets. Yeah.
thank you.
Other questions? Seeing none? A motion?
Your Honor, I
Councilman
make a
Moore?
motion that we approve the 3-year agreement with Applied Imaging for $859 per month for management of print services and authorize the city manager or his designee to add additional print devices to the agreement.
Second.
Motion by Councilman Lamore, supported by Councilwoman Germaini on item 2572, the Managed Print Services Agreement. Seeing no further comments, clerk, please call the roll.
Councilperson Germaini? Lamore?
Yes.
Felder?
Yes.
Whitman? Michaelangeli? Vining? Mayor Clark?
Yes. Next item, please.
Is item number 2582, Budget Amendment ALCC.
Councilwoman Vining.
Yes, Your Honor. There's a request to authorize $20,000 from the general fund to the ALCC for the purchase of furniture, supplies, and equipment, along with the new entryway sign. Of that $20,000, $8,000 for an entryway sign. It sounds a lot for a sign. So has that sign been looked at? What type, is this some digital electronic sign or?
See what Mr. Sell has to say, or anybody else?
I haven't had any connection with the sign. I believe the city manager has been working with our communications director on that, but I have not seen a design or anything related to it.
Other comments or questions? Councilman, I know you may have more, and I'm just seeing if there's additional and what the next step may be. Councilwoman? Yes.
Would maybe Stephanie know what type of sign, or may I
she
ask
might.
her? Do you know anything about this sign? Could you?
We have been working on the design of the sign, but what we wanted to do was make sure it was lighted. And I think that's where the cost comes in, because they need to deal with the electricity and the electrician and making sure that it's hooked up right. I'm not an electrician, but that's where the cost got expensive, was because we wanted the sign to be lighted. And it is not currently.
Is this sign going to be on the building or?
Oh yeah, it's going to be the same place where the sign is now. It's just going to have a new design to it. It's going to read the Opportunity Center at ALCC, and then it's going to have lighting behind it. We can share the design for sure. I mean, I think Jody's been working on it primarily, so you definitely can
Yeah, I'd definitely
take
be
a look.
interested in seeing that.
But I think the added cost was definitely for the lighting because there's some electrical work that needs to be done to make that happen.
Other questions or comments? Obviously, it's before the council this evening regarding a budget amendment. If, I guess the options are is to make that motion to accept, make the motion not to accept. Of course, there could be a motion to table if there's wish to do so. If with that, I'll entertain a motion.
Your Honor, I'll make a motion that we approve the budget amendment authorizing the transfer of $20,000 from the general fund contingency to the ALCC.
Second.
Motion by Councilman Eikalangi, supported by Councilman Felder, on item 2582, the budget amendment ALCC. Other comments? Clerk, please call the roll.
Councilperson Germaine? Yes. Lamore?
Yes.
Felder?
Yes.
Whitman? Yes. Eikalangi?
Yes.
Vining?
Yes.
Mayor Clark?
Yes. Next item, please.
No further items, Your Honor.
Councilwoman Germaine, we'll start the council comments.
I want to say that I too am very excited about Labor Park and the groundbreaking being so soon. I'm surprised about that, actually. I thought it would be in the spring, so I'm very happy to go in the cold weather and dig up dirt. Also, please keep in mind there are a lot of Halloween activities going on right now, and while you're driving, be careful, drive slow, because there's a lot of kids and adults in costume. Thank you.
Councilman Lamore.
Yes, Your Honor. Want to thank Sam and Ken from Flags Over Veterans for their generous comments tonight to us. I think we should be thanking them as well for their dedication to the veterans in our community, as well as the war memorials and the flags at Veterans Park. They're just excellent people, and they're to be commended for what they're doing for all of our war veterans, and I really, personally, I appreciate what they're doing. Want to apologize for not putting this in last time, but our port has a lot of activity down there, and there was a huge move that they generated this past month. They brought in the Stater, GE Stater for Fermi from the Netherlands. It was delivered to the port. Lot of action down there. Our Port Commissioner Paul has done a tremendous job in getting the port ready to receive this. He's gone through countless number of hours to get the action handled so that we could handle it here in Monroe and not have it handled down in Toledo or Cleveland. So he's to be commended greatly for this. The motor vessel Happy Ranger brought the Stater in from the Netherlands. And the nice thing about this is it loaded a shipment of towers from Ventower for delivery back to the Netherlands. So what a great win-win situation for not only the port, but the city of Monroe. That's it.
Thank you. Councilman Felder.
Thank you, Your Honor. Just a general thank you to staff, especially those that are consistently here with us and have to stay late to do so. Furthermore, to Impact, Millward and Corey back there that record the meetings, and many of our other regulars in the room that dedicate your evenings to be with us here tonight and all the other nights. So thank you guys for showing up.
Thank you. Councilwoman Whitman.
I have no comments, Your Honor.
Councilman Eikalangi.
Your Honor, I have one comment. This is for Mr. Sell to pass over to Mr. Pastu when he's back. At some point, as part of the workshop agenda, I'd like to have on as a discussion item the long-range plan for the airport facilities. That's all I have, Your Honor.
Thank you. Councilwoman Vining.
Yes, Your Honor, thank you. I just want to say to the council that when we consider things like increasing the frequency of the rental inspection program, changing, increasing the fees, charging more for refuse services, restricting unlimited pickup, I want us to realize that 9 times out of 10, those costs are going to be passed on to the renters. And the reason why I get so nervous about making these type of policy changes is because these things disproportionately affect low-income people, and those chronic and drug nuisance ordinance disproportionately affect Black people. And so I'm very cautious when we go to make those type of changes. Of course, we want our landlords to be responsible, but when we think about that, we have to think about the fact that a lot of those costs are going to be passed on to the renters. In my opinion, we already have high rental rates in the county and low wages. So it's just not really, it's not always, there's sometimes unintended consequences to making these type of changes, and I'd like us to consider those things as a council before we move to make those changes. That's all I have, Your Honor. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilwoman. I have a few comments, some activities and things to review. I want to start by that the Monroe County School Safety Summit, and it's a presentation that's going to be occurring at the Monroe County Community College Meyer Theater, Lessons from Columbine. It's a review and actually what actually happened in factual information. It's a presentation. It's on Wednesday of this week, the 23rd. And there's 2 sessions, one from 8 a.m. to 10 a.m., and the other's from 6:30 p.m. to 8:30 p.m. I understand it's open to those that wish to attend. There's a different session that's closed for students and others, but if you want to think about safety at schools, but also information of what's factual regarding what's going on, it's an opportunity to go out to the community college at the Meyer Theater. I don't know that I have to ask Patrick this, but I know that myself, having gone out to the DPS, there are still leaf bags available. I see a nod yes, because when I was there, they had many left, but there's still opportunities for those that haven't had the ability to get out to the DPS lot this week, the 22nd, the 23rd, and the 24th, Tuesday, Wednesday, and Thursday. It will be available from 2:30 to 5:30 p.m. And of course, while they last, make sure you have identification with you, as showing that it's your address and that you reside here, and the leaf bags that are necessary that you need to collect. I think it was mentioned, some of the activities the MCOP mentioned, but there's also a children's Halloween party at the ALCC on Saturday, the 26th, from 5 to 8 p.m. That's open, so opportunity for the children and youth to go down and participate at the LCC in a program. There's also the Downtown Merchants is having the trick or treat downtown on the same date, the 26th, from 12 to 1:30. The Monroe County Business Development Corporation, of course, with our partnership with them, the Focus on the Future Summit is on Tuesday, October 29th, from 5:30 to 8 p.m. But the discussion will be about transportation, rail transportation, and moving forward and talk about not just commercial rail, but also passenger rail. I'll say that's, looking at it, it may be down the road, but then things come at us pretty quickly. If you want to learn about what some of the long-term plans on that, it's Tuesday the 29th. And these things are available on each of those websites. We were talking about Halloween and trick-or-treat in our community and about being safe. Just a reminder that this Thursday, October 31st, is the official date and time is from 6:30 to 8 p.m. here in the city of Monroe, and I know the same is within the townships. I just want to give another comment. I know Stephanie brought it in her presentation earlier about the MCOP Walk for Warmth, with this Saturday, November 2nd, from 10 a.m. to 12 noon, and that's at Loringer Square. So those are my comments this evening. Clerk Treasurer Lavoie.
Yes, Your Honor, I have a few comments. One, in relation to the construction in Labor Park. I think I've mentioned this before, but Patrick, if we could make sure we're working together. If we do break ground, and obviously this fall, that will put us very close to the election, and I just want to make sure there isn't any negative repercussions for that polling place, okay? Thank you. I see you nodding your head, so thank you. I also wanted to just talk with the residents a bit. There have been a few scattered, I don't don't want to call them complaints so much as just letting me know that they haven't received their absentee ballots. So I immediately went to the post office because the last few years that's where we found the problem has been. The post office readily agreed to not forward any of the ballots on to the city of Detroit for processing. So that should ease whatever issues are happening out there. It usually does. But of course, anyone who thinks they should have their absentee ballot, please contact our office, 734-384-9140, and we would get that out to you right away. But the post office is always willing to be part of the solution. So I'm very thankful for them for agreeing to that so readily, because they do have to, that takes extra work for them, and I appreciate that. And finally, the Election Commission will have its pre-accuracy testing of the election equipment that will be used at the November election here in the city. It is an open meeting, and therefore any resident who wishes, or anyone who wishes to come down, it'll be here at 10 o'clock in the council chambers with members of the Election Commission conducting the test under the supervision of myself and others from the clerk treasurer's office. And that's all I have.
Thank you. Mr. Sell, comments from administration?
The only thing I have to pass along is something from Mr. Lewis. He told me today that the paving on Front Street will be done very soon. I'm not going to give a specific time, but let's just say very soon. And then the contractor will be moving over to Hollywood and Maywood to work on projects in that area. Other than that, I don't have anything else.
Thank you. And just a reminder of that, because we've talked about, I know council gets requests about the projects in various locations in the city, but that information is available through the city's website, and he does put out the Road Watch weekly to keep everybody updated, so I appreciate that as well. Any comments moving forward? Comments from those present here this evening? Any further comments? Yes, ma'am. Name and address, please come to the podium. Got to come to the podium. Thank you.
Well, Yvonne Nadinger, 930 Scarlet Oak. Yesterday, I think I was able to go from Telegraph to Front Street to go to church, so coming to the meeting tonight, I assumed that would be the same, and it wasn't, so I showed up late. And what time did the meeting start?
7:30.
Okay,
We had two previous meetings. We had a 6 o'clock closed session, and then we had a immediate following was a work session, and we were literally getting that done 1 minute before the 7:30 meeting. We went right into it at 7:30. We started the meeting.
I was afraid I missed more than my 5 minutes late, so
Oh.
based on the discussions, it sounded like I had missed a lot. That's basically it. You are going ahead with the plans. I see all the signs over on the west side there complaining about changing the road situation, the city streets, but that is still on track to go forward, correct?
Well, I know Mr. Lewis here, but I'll make a comment if I'm off. I know they'll come up, or Mr. Sal will. On 7th and 8th Street are moving forward. The discussion will continue as that continues regarding Cass and Harrison has not been decided at this point by the council. We're still starting with the 7th and 8th Street, yes.
Okay, when will that work start?
Well, Mr. Lewis, maybe because now I'd be kind of guessing dates and times, Mr. Lewis. Maybe an update would be appropriate, because I know that those here and those listening, if you could please come forward and just give an update the status of that.
Again, Honorable Mayor and Council, Patrick Lewis, Director of Engineering and Public Services. Yeah, actually, the contractor, we've switched gears, and Zyler Excavating, that's been doing our big project this year, actually had a better opening in their schedule, but we've been trying to work that around everything else they're doing. I'm told tomorrow's the day they're going to excavate. They didn't want to do it ahead of the rain today, so they'll get that excavated, and the next time we have the concrete subcontractor available, that's GM and Sons, they'll pour the, we'll call them the parking bays on West 7th. That's what's been holding up the conversion, is we don't want to do it until we have those parking bays. So moving forward from excavating this week to hopefully pouring later this week, they're going to do that in conjunction with the Jefferson Court project, because that's the last of the water main work that we're doing. It'll either be late this week or early next week that they'll pour that, but then we have to wait a full week for that to cure before we can put people parking in there. So then we've got to do the sign conversion. It's probably going to be the first or second week of November now that we're looking at, just based on backing off those timeframes. So
I'm going to make a comment that just to follow up to that, and it might be something also in consideration, because just as Clerk Treasurer Lavoie mentioned, the work at Labor Park, and of course the voting station there, which is at the library. Woodcraft Square is also a voting location, And I don't think it's not something we want to be doing just a couple days before the election, start reconverting roads. And we want to make sure we move forward in a timely fashion. But please take that into consideration so people aren't challenged or by getting to the polls, but also just saying, I'm not going to get there, because we want to make it as accommodating as possible. Please take that in consideration as well.
We already have been thinking about the time, because we've also got a holiday in there, Veterans Day, that there might be some people off. So we're conscious of that and very cognizant. I would doubt we would do that that close based on where our timing is now. So.
I mean, everybody can speak for themselves here as council, but I think waiting until after the election day might be beneficial to the residents driving there without some confusion.
I don't think we'll be able to do it before that now
Excellent.
anyway, based on the construction. So.
All right. Very
Thanks.
good. Thank you. Other comments from those present here this evening? Yes, ma'am. Name and address, please.
Hi, I'm Gloria Rafco, 127 Borges. And I'd like to make a comment about Mr. Sells. I worked with him previously, and if anybody is conservative about money, it's him. And if he says that you can go ahead with projects, I would say it's fine. And we have Mr. Cochran and Mr. Pastu out there trying to bring business into the city. And when businesses come, they're going to look at where are the people going to live? What are the people going to have here? So we really need to focus on our schools, parks, something that people want to move to Monroe for, because we're trying to build up the city. Thank you, Your Honor.
Other comments from those present here this evening? Seeing none, a motion to adjourn would be in order.
Motion to adjourn.
Support.
Me too. So, motion from Councilman Moore, supported by Councilman Felder to adjourn. Clerk, please call the roll.
Councilperson Germaine?
Yes.
Lamore?
Yes.
Felder?
Yes.
Whitman? Yes. Michaelangeli? Yes. Vining? Mayor Clark?
Yes. Thank you all for being here.